Ross. Welcome back to This Is Horror.
Thank you for having me yet again. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be talking with you. And this is the point where I'd ordinarily ask what have been the big changes since you were last on the show. I kind of know some of these changes because we've been talking quite regularly, but for the listeners who presumably have not hacked into our WhatsApp messaging, what's
Yes.
been going on yet? What's been
Um,
going on both personally and professionally?
so, personally, so it's my daughter's birthday today. She is fast asleep after a very exciting day. And earlier on this week, I finished my 14th book, which, if you were listening to the last episodes, you know I write quite a lot. But this book, I started writing last year in October, and I would generally finish it in 2 months. But then in November, our landlord put our rent up by £1,000 a month to 2,500. So then we kind of couldn't afford that because that's more than I actually earn. And then I just stopped writing for about, I think it was about 7 months. And the manuscript was at about 40,000 words. And then, we went homeless. A friend of ours called David said, "Look, come and live with in my house." Like, it was temporary accommodation, but we moved in there, put everything in storage. Managed to get a mortgage, and then bought a house in Wales. So we actually moved country, but not very far. But we're in a different country now. And then this month, I reopened the Word file and reread it all, and then just started afresh. And so probably 3 weeks, I've finished the novel. So it's now about 78k. But yeah, all done, dusted. Our early morning texts were very inspirational to keep me on the go, as you were slamming keys your end and I'm slamming keys my end. But yeah, it's good. It's a good place to be. And I have a little whiskey to celebrate each book when I finish it. And I hadn't had the opportunity, so I'm having one now whilst we talk.
Very nice stuff. And what is the whiskey in question?
It is the Singleton 12-year-old single malt. I've got a cupboard in there full of whiskies because parents and people keep buying me bottles for birthdays and Christmas, and I normally just drink it when I've finished a book, so I've just got loads of whiskey to drink through. But it's very nice. Recommended.
So I think now we're finding out actually this is the real reason why you write so quickly because you've set this rule that you can only drink the whiskey when you finish the story. So yeah, we thought you all just really enjoyed.
Yeah.
We thought you enjoyed writing and completing books, but
But
actually
actually, it's
you
the
just like drinking whiskey. And I mean, we should say as well, if it wasn't clear, that, last time we spoke, you were talking about you only write on Fridays. For this book that you finished, you were writing, probably 5 out of 7 days a week.
Yeah, I just because normally it is a Friday, and the difference this time as to why I was writing every day is because it's summer holidays here, and my children are off school. So my usual Friday is taken up by doing family stuff, which is great. Been to a couple of castles and other ruins in Wales. There's a lot of ruins in Wales, and yeah, just doing that kind of stuff. So what I was doing is getting into work extra early so that I could sit down and spend like an hour and a half, just getting words on the page. And most of those sessions ended in about like between 1.8 to 2.5k each time, and it just builds up. If you do it every day, that's what happens. But But come September, starting a new book and going to be doing it on Fridays because the rest of the week will be working. But it'll be a nice quiet house. I can listen to my music and then ponder the next book.
Yeah, and I think we'll get into that a little bit later because that is something that I have a vested interest in, let's say, but we're going to save that
Yeah.
for later because I want to talk about, completing this book that you've just finished. Obviously, it has taken place during this chaotic, to put it bluntly, but to also understate it, period of your life, probably one of the worst periods of your life. Is there some sort of psychological relief to have now done that, post homelessness and when you had to put the writing on hold for a bit?
Yeah, like it was really weird because I was writing it and every day I was getting closer to the kind of the end goal. And I think this is because every book's different, but this one just like when I finished typing, and I had the story in there, I just felt like a massive relief. And I don't. It's really weird because you don't think that a book. Obviously, books are kind of like time capsules of what's gone on in your life. Um, and like when I look at a book, I can kind of remember what I was doing at that point, and what were the big things that were going on. But for this one in particular, it just felt like a massive weight. And it's odd because the book doesn't deal with those kind of themes, but I think it was just drenched in that kind of like difficult period. And I think also just moving into this kind of new home where hopefully I will write many, many more books. But having that first book written in this home is kind of like the new starting point. Um, and yeah, many more will be written. But to have that one be the first one completed here in our house that no one can take away from us, that is just ours because it's the first home we've ever owned because we've always rented. But yeah, just to have that as the kind of foundation stone for everything else that's going to come. It's really exciting, and it was just a real relief. Not for the writing because I loved it, but I just felt like it felt different than any other book when I'd finished it, and I was just like, I can put that one down now. Yeah,
And I assume too, from what we've spoken about before, that this was a book which kind of took the longest and meant that you had this break between not just drafts, but a break within a
mm.
draft. What was it like to have put it aside when it was incomplete and then not only return to it, but obviously because of that period of time, have to reread everything? Do you think it enhanced the process? Do you think there were challenges? Is it something that you would now, having done it, actively and deliberately look at doing again?
I don't think I would ever do it again. I think I don't know if we spoke about it in the podcast last time or if it was in the after bit. But like when I'm writing, like I need to get. So if I'm writing a chapter or a couple of chapters, I make sure I've got enough time to write that chapter completely, so I don't have to come back to it. And this one, yeah, I don't think I would ever do it again because I was rereading it because I printed it off to reread, and then as I was rereading it, I was like just adding notes to kind of like bits because although I'd stopped writing, my head had carried on writing. So when I sat down to write it, I kind of knew the direction, and it kind of changed a little bit from my original. Um, Whether that was the external factors coming in on me or not, but and I was like, right, okay, I need to remember that when I go back to edit the whole thing. And I made loads of notes, and rereading it was good and helped hone it. I think the only way I'm going to tell because the voice of the piece as well, because when I started writing it, I was in one frame of mind before anything had happened. And then after is after, and all that stuff had gone by. And I think I got back into the headspace. I think the only person that's going to tell me if there's a definite kind of change is going to be my editor, Andy, when he gets hold of it. Austrian Spencer is his kind of handle on social media. And it'd be interesting to see if he can see where I stopped and where I restarted. But from what I've done and read, and I finished it and I was rereading bits as I was writing it, I think I've successfully managed to keep the tone all the way through, aided by listening to the same soundtrack when I was writing it. So that kind of hopefully underscored everything I've written. But yeah, like leaving something that long, like because I've never done that before. So I was also doubting myself before I started writing. And then I almost was going to just leave it and put it on hold and just maybe never pick it up again, because it was quite obviously that whole experience. But that would be like partly reanimating a body. So I was just like, no, I've got to give it like a heart and lungs and finally just bring it to life. So yeah, just dived back in, and it just felt so good, and like to be back writing, to be kind of just going about my daily routine and thinking about the book, and on my commute to Bristol from Wales, like just making notes in my head, so that when I got to work, I was like, oh yeah, that's where that bit goes. And so yeah, it was great. But yeah, I would never, I say never, but hopefully I'll never have to leave a book so long before I finish it. And yeah, it's I don't know, it might work for some people, but for me, it was driving me nuts that there was a half-finished book just waiting for me.
And you said that during the writing, you were listening to one album on repeat. This is something that we've mentioned a little bit offline and in our private conversations. But what I'm wondering is, how do you decide what album to listen to? Is it just a case of this is an album that I really like? Or do you try to look at kind of a link between the album and the tone that you're going for in the novel? Or are there other factors at play?
um, so any music I listen to is purely instrumental. That's one major thing. I tend to try, because there's a few composers that I like. So like Hans Zimmer, Benjamin Wallfish, they're two of my favourites. The Newton brothers do some great stuff as well. And then James Newton Howard. I think that's kind of like my favourites. When kind of choosing a soundtrack, it's normally I'll kind of think of the themes of the book and kind of maybe even the genre. So I wrote a book recently called Cradle of Glass, which is with my agent Elizabeth Copps, and that's a kind of bit more science fiction. It's still got its feet in the horror, but it's I'd say it's science fiction first. And for that one, I listened to Interstellar, like on repeat, and that's how I listen to the song, just so I can make sure that the story in my mind is just underscored by that kind of tone of the album. For this one that I just finished, I was listening to Alien Romulus by Benjamin Wallfish, and yeah, like it's that one's a bit darker and there's a lot of kind of strings and things like that. So I think that helped keep the mood of the book. And it's so weird because when I listen to an album so frequently when I'm writing, if I hear that music when I'm not at the desk, I can remember certain scenes that I wrote whilst it was playing, and they play back in my mind. So when I got back to, and I listen to them on vinyl normally when I'm at home. So this one was a bit strange because I was listening to it on my phone in the office typing. Yeah, it just helped ease me back into the book because I could just feel all the kind of emotions and everything when I was writing it previously were just flowing back into it. I think listening to the music when I'm writing as well also helps pace the book, which is odd because it keeps on kind of like the tracks change, but for me the pace is in the whole album, so it's just listening to that and then just getting the flow of it. And deciding on an album normally is either because I buy quite a lot of vinyl records, so it's normally one that I may have bought that I've not listened to yet. Because sometimes I buy vinyls without having seen the film because I want to just listen to the music without the film's kind of influence. So I do have every now and then I'll probably have like 5 or 6 to pick from, and then yeah, when I'm writing a book, I will buy if I haven't got it, and I think like maybe I've watched the film and I'm like, oh, that's a really good soundtrack. I always buy myself a copy just so I've got like a little keepsake afterwards as well. But I've got a few lined up for my next project, so I've just got those in the background, which I'm kind of listening to just see which one would be the tone for the next book. But yeah, and it's something I only developed kind of. I think when I wrote The Devil's Pocketbook was the first time that I'd got a soundtrack and just listened to that whilst I was writing. Normally, I just have either silence or just other music on in the background with words, which is a nightmare because I was writing Juniper once and I had John Denver playing in the background, and I wrote a whole paragraph that was just his his words, not mine. But yeah, so now I just listen to instrumental, and that's mainly Josh Malerman's influence because I think he does similar technique, and I was just like, oh, that sounds good, I'll try that, and not look back.
Yeah, I can't listen to music with words unless it's so obscure black metal that
Mm.
I can't make out the words.
Mm.
But actually, because I listen to a lot of extreme metal, I found that with a lot of death metal, I can't listen to it because I've got quite good at just tapping in and knowing exactly what they're saying, even though it's in this growly voice. But black metal is often distorted enough that it's like just don't concentrate on the lyrical part and you'll be fine and it will be instrumental. But as I said to you in a text message, sometimes I have to be careful too, because if the soundtrack is too dramatic,
Mm.
even though there aren't words, I'm tapping into just like I'm enjoying that music too much and it's becoming distracting. So yeah, I almost have to start writing, put something on and just see is this the vibe? Is this allowing me to write to it? So at the moment, I've been listening to a lot of albums by the band Russian Circles. That just seems to have the right kind of balance in terms of what I need to
Mm.
just hone in and to focus on the work. And I mean, you're absolutely right that if we repeat a band or an album enough, then when we hear it later, it brings us back to the place that we were when we were listening to it. And I've definitely found that with writing, but I found it with other events in my life. And funnily enough, when I was reading Nosferatu by Joe Hill, a lot of that I was commuting to work on a noisy train. So I just put something on to get rid of that.
Mm.
And mostly it was the soundtrack to the video game Silent Hill Downpour. So if ever I hear that, or probably if I were to go back and play the game, I'd then just be thinking of the Joe Hill book, which is kind of cool in a way. It's
It is,
combining
yeah.
two horrors. Yeah.
Just meshed together.
Yeah, I'm expecting Charlie Manx in his massive car from
Just turn around the corner.
Nosferatu to show up, but actually it's going to be a kind of mutated nurse. So
Mm.
yeah, there's no question attached to that.
Yeah.
Just waiting for
Uh,
some kind of response, like
it's interesting. That's an interesting flip on Silent Hill and Nosferatu.
yeah. I mean, I'm kind of down for anything that Joe Hill does, and I'm down for any Silent Hill game. So if they want some weird collaboration, that's absolutely fine.
The front of the queue.
Yeah, just Charlie Manx turning up in Silent Hill. What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not a lot. There's not a lot of children in Silent Hill, which is kind of his MO. He's just going to turn around.
Turn around and walk away, shaking his head.
Yeah. But, talking about books, last time we spoke, we didn't even get into any of your books or any specifics. So it seems smart if we start with the Juniper trilogy. So, I mean, firstly, did you always know it was going to be a trilogy? And if not, what were the seeds that presented that to you?
Um, the short answer is no. I didn't think it was going to be. I didn't even think it was going to be a book when I wrote it. So, because it was during COVID, and I was just like, I had more time, and I'd written short stories before. Thought I'd give it a go writing something longer. So I started writing Juniper, um, and just absolutely loved it. Like, there's so it might be different, but I love the difference between writing a short story and a long story. I say long because novellas can be longer, but the way I was able to kind of riff and go off in different tangents and things like that is just not what you can do in short stories, and I just loved that, like, just expanding characters with just kind of little kind of just tidbits that you could just chuck in there and be like, oh yeah, that's quite cool. I'll add that to that character and I'll do that. And then the town started to kind of just build around these characters, and I was just taken with it, which is weird because created it. So I was just like, oh yeah, that person could live there and that could do that. It wasn't until I started writing, because I really like writing horrible characters. So it wasn't until I started writing about, there's a weird bug on my table. Don't know where that just came from. It wasn't until I started writing weird characters and like nasty characters that I was like, oh, actually, I think this town, just by the introduction of Klein, who's the antagonist in Juniper, I was like, yeah, he's got a whole backstory that I'd really love to delve into, but I can't in this because I wanted to keep it short because I didn't want to lose control of it. And then as I finished the book, loved the process of it, and yeah, I haven't stopped since. But like as soon as I finished it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to write a novel. And it was like I literally finished that, put it aside, edited it, and, had other kind of things going on, which we spoke about in the previous podcast. And then I was just like, yeah, I'm going to write a full novel because that's what you do, isn't it? And I sat down and I was just contemplating what I was going to do, and I wanted to do something a bit different. So I wrote Tome, which is the prequel to Juniper. So we went backwards kind of 15 years, and the story centered around Klein. It doesn't really center around him. He's in it, but as a younger person, and you kind of get to see how he became the person that he was in Juniper. And I loved writing that book. I love writing all my books, but that book in particular, like it, I felt like I'd grown when I was writing it. I felt that it just all fell into place. And then and that was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award, which was, in my mind, was absolutely mental. Because I'd written Juniper, lots of stuff was said about that. And then I wrote Tome, and it just blew me away. Like, I didn't expect it to be read as widely as it was. I didn't expect it to be nominated for an award. And then it was also nominated for a Splatterpunk Award in the same year. And it just blew me away because I'm just sitting there writing, never written before, and just started picking up a pen. I don't do that. Typing on the computer, and just made like some connections with podcasters and like book reviewers and things like that. And like Sadie Hartman was a massive champion of the books, which was incredible. And then, like Michael Clark. And I met lots of people through writing Tome who are still dear friends, and that was great. And then I wrote a couple of books in between, and I kind of thought the story wasn't finished. Had lots of people asking me if there was going to be another book. And then the weirdest thing happened was that a publisher contacted me out of the blue and said that they wondered if it was going to be a trilogy. And I said, yeah. I said, I haven't written the third book, but yes, it's going to be. And that publisher said, okay, we want to re-release Juniper, Tome, and we want the third book. And I was like, okay. As I said, I've not written the third book, but I can do that. And it's the first time I ever wrote to a deadline, and I wouldn't recommend it. I don't really like it. I felt a lot of pressure because also it's a third book. I didn't want it to be rubbish. And then I just, as you know from my sketchbooks and stuff, just sat down, started sketching stuff out, working out kind of structure and things. And then I thought, okay, well, this book's going to be set 15 years after Juniper. So it goes Juniper, then backwards, and then right forwards to the kind of end. And there's characters that pop up through all the books, so you can kind of follow people throughout. And it just spilled out of me quicker than I thought it would because I was writing to a deadline. But and then the publisher that said that they would do it then took loads of pre-orders and then decided they weren't going to publish it. So then I just released it by myself. The annoying thing was I took Juniper and Tome out of publication for it, and it had been out of publication. Well, basically, I was nominated for the Bram Stoker Award, and then a couple of months later, I just stopped it. So it couldn't be purchased anywhere, and that annoyed me slightly because it was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award, so I'm assuming there would have been some interest in people wanting to buy it and read it. But things happen, you move on. And so I re-released them, had Daniel Serra covers made for them all, which were going to be with the publisher, but the publisher allowed me to keep those. So I re-released them all in hardback, and they all fit together. So if you hold them all face up, it's just a long picture of Juniper all the way across through the seasons that are in the books. Um, and yeah, and I like it. It's a great little series. I Lots of people come to read the rest of my stuff through Juniper and Tome, um, and yeah, and they just stick around, which is lovely. Like, I've got a good little following through that. I'd love them to be read more widely, but I'm happy with the kind of who's reading them, picking them up, and I hope as well when you read them, it kind of shows my growth as an author, because obviously when I went back and read Juniper when I was writing the third book, when I was trying to just make sure I didn't mess up the timelines and stuff, I was also like, this is a great book, but yeah, I've grown since I wrote it, and I could tell when I wrote it. So I hope that doesn't put anyone off. It's a great book, but but I could see my progression, which is great because it shows I'm developing and moving forward. But yeah, so the answer to the question was no, I didn't believe it was going to be a trilogy, but it turned out to be a very good one.
Yeah, I certainly see the Juniper trilogy as a season of your work. And then, kind of, if we look at particularly Only the Stains Remain, The Devil's Pocketbook, and I Died Too, but They Haven't Buried Me Yet, that feels another kind of season. That feels like this is grief horror. This
Mm.
is what Josh Malerman was talking about when he said something along the lines of "You are the master of grief horror." And so we're going to get to that season in a bit, but for the Juniper trilogy season, I mean, something that I'm sure will stand out to readers if they're familiar with who you are and where you're from is that you decided, for your first book to set it in America. And it's got such a distinct American voice. It's almost a little bit, there's a disconnect. It's like, wait, did Ross become American? What's happened here? Did you live a past life and you've tapped into it? Because it feels very authentic. And so, I mean, firstly, let's talk about the decision to set it in America, to embark upon writing this series in America, even though you've admitted that you didn't even know it was going to be a book or a trilogy. So it wasn't so conscious to commit for such a long time. And then also, what were some of the challenges of that?
Well, thank you. That is a very huge compliment. Um, so when I decided to write it, I think I've spoken about this on a couple of other podcasts as well, but and I think we spoke about it before. For me, when I was growing up, horror was American. Um, I know we had James Herbert and other great British horror writers, but like I grew up not really reading much, but watching a ton of horror, and all of it, all the what I would say the good stuff. Um, the majority of it was all American. And it just seems to be the way that's how I viewed horror, is that it was American first, and then we tried to get in there. And yeah, when I started writing, I was just like, yeah, no, I'm going to set it in this kind of like weird, kind of almost pre-apocalyptic town where you're not quite sure what's going on. Because I did a bit of research before, and like just like some of the isolation in America, that is kind of like poverty and isolation, and families that live in the sticks and don't see anyone for like months or years. And I forgot what that family's called, but the family that Texas Chainsaw Massacre was kind of like based around. I was just like, there must be places in America that are kind of like towns that are just on the periphery, that people just drive through or round and don't really stop. and I was just like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. That's great. Um, and then I was like, oh yeah, crap, I'm English. I was just like, I need to really nail this because, you know, if I get things wrong, people are going to notice. If the language is off slightly, if I've got kind of British kind of flourishes in there of characters saying something like, "Oh, you blooming better come back here." I was like, they're going to know. So I just tried really hard to just not do that. I had another writer called Joseph Sale. Um, he he helped me edit this one. I was friends with him beforehand, and he does editing and is a very great writer as well. And so he helped me kind of hone it once it was done. Um, and you know, yeah, I think there was one thing that I got wrong, and people pointed it out. Was that I think something about the roadkill. I think I said something like I can't remember if it was an armadillo. It's been a long time since I read it. Like maybe an armadillo or something was just run over in the road, and then they were like, "Well, because you mentioned the surrounding outskirts and like what's near it, that animal is not like native to that part of America. It's somewhere else." And so that's, you know, it ruined the whole book for me. I was like, okay,
No, you should have said,
yeah,
"Wow, if it was not native, but it showed up and got ran over, what kind of shit out of X-Files is
that was
happening?
impressive.
What dimension was
Um,
opened up?"
but yeah, and like you know, when I released it, it was great. Like it did really well, and you know, lots of because it's I don't know. I think, and also this came apparent when as I've been writing, but the horror scene in America, and it's obviously due to population, but well, I'd probably say the majority of my readership is American. Um, and I'm not sure why that is. I don't know whether British people are just a bit like, oh, what's horror? Um, but lots of my readership are American, and you know, when I released it, they kind of took me to heart and the book, um, and yeah, and some of the issues I like, not issues, but things I had to think about a lot were just the Englishness and the Americanisms, and you know, like a car boot is a trunk, and like just all those kind of bits that just to give it the flavour that it needs, I had to just make sure I went through it with a fine tooth comb and just pulled anything out that was like pants and trousers and all that kind of stuff. Um, but I'm really grateful that you said that it sounded American and like the characters, because that I wanted the way they spoke to be authentic. And if you've seen that, that's amazing. Um, and then with tone, that was a whole different ball game. That was I had to spend a lot of time with a developmental editor with that one because I was that one's set in a prison. The whole book is set in a prison, so I was obviously writing about a period of time and about the American prison system, and like they opened my eyes to lots of things because there was certain like the way I visualized it on the page, and they were like, "Yeah, you might have to change that because at that period there wouldn't have been that type of thing." And I was just like, and it was incredible. And for the life of me, I can't think of the editor that I used for that one. I only used them for that book, but they were recommended to me, and um, they did a marvelous job at it. And that's what editors do, and you know they're incredible. And yeah, so and that one was great. And by the time I written the third one, I was like, I kind of know this town. I know how I'm speaking. I know what they're going to sound like, and I've already mapped it out. So I kind of had that kind of landscape. Um, and there's scenes in each of the. I'm going off topic here, but there's scenes in each of the books that I think like when I wrote them, I was just like, oh crap! Like it made me like shudder because they were a little bit like, oh. Um, so I know that they're kind of the horror is in them and that it's well written because it scared me when I was writing it. But yeah, there's some scenes, and like to hear people like when they review them or have like done a video review or whatever, when they highlight those scenes in particular, I was like, oh, that's when I actually scared myself when I was writing, um, which is great because it came across on the page. Um, but yeah, like for me, horror has always been American. Um, but after kind of after those books, I was kind of like, no, I want to reclaim horror as being English as well or British. I was like, yeah, I'm going to start setting my books here, just because it takes away a lot of me just having to remember all the things that I had to learn during that trilogy. Um, and yeah, we got a lot of horrors here as well.
I have plenty to say about British authors writing for a predominantly American audience, or not so much writing for, but having an awareness that that is the bulk of your readers, because it's, a similar thing for me. But before I get into that, I do just have to say, I mean, with Juniper, generally, God, there's a rawness to it. It's almost like the garage band recording, but in a really good way. Like I felt like you just didn't give a fuck in terms of content, in terms of convention, in terms of pushing the limits. I mean, I think it was Tome that won the Splatterpunk award, but if anything ever just embedded that punk rock splatterpunk no shits given aesthetic. It's the first book, it's Juniper. And I mean, from right off the bat, like, within the God, I guess it was the first few pages, just revealing these interbred cats and
Yeah,
what is going on here? There was something of a kind of younger Jack Ketchum and an unfiltered Jack Ketchum, which sounds ridiculous for anyone who's read his work because it's like, well, when was he filtered? When when was there censorship? But God, Bob talks often about fearless writing. Just took it to a whole new level. I don't think fear ever entered the equation for you. I mean, if I didn't know that you only drink whiskey to celebrate the end of books, I'd have thought this was some drug-fueled, crazed book. But everything I'm saying, I mean it as a compliment. And how you didn't get cancelled or upset a tremendous amount of people, and actually you got the opposite. You got
yeah,
someone like Sadie Hartman, Mother Horror, actually championing it.
yeah.
Incredible.
When I think of the content and like just how balls to the wall crazy it is, and yeah, all the cat stuff, and just like I had a lot of stuff in my mind, like lots of different stories and things, and I was just like, right, let's just go for this and let's just see where it goes. And like at that point, I started reading quite a lot, so I was like, I had read Jack Ketchum and um, Adam Neville and Paul Tremblay and Josh Malerman and stuff like that, and I was just kind of like, and also read a lot of like loads of like indie writers, um, which when I was reading them, I was like, man, these guys are on fire. Like these are so good. And at that point, I never like when I was reading those, I kind of like just felt like I'd snuck in the back door somewhere, and I was like, oh, look at all these amazing authors that are just like releasing these books, but like when I talk to people about them, they've never heard of them, and then I was just like, this is like a gold mine of like talent, um, and and I was just like, yeah, let's just go for it. Like I've not written a book. If this turns like, because at that point I was like, I don't even know if this is going to be a book. Like I was just like, yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just write this about this crazy town with crazy people in it, and it's a little bit weird, a little bit crazy, but I just needed something to hang that craziness on. And I think with Betty and Janet in it, and then having Klein as the kind of protagonist or antagonist, it just worked. And there is a kind of like, I'd say, twist in it. A lot of readers don't get it, but the book still plays out if they don't get it or if they do get it. And I think that was one of the keys, because when people have read it and they've got it, they've just been like, man, this is the most crazy, depraved thing I've ever read. And then like some people are just like, oh, what did you get from it? And then they'd say, we'll have to go off chat to talk about it. And then they'd tell them, and then they're like, oh my goodness, yeah. So I think that is the kind of like it was the key to the book, is that it's written in such a way that if you get it, then all these dominoes fall into place that have taken part throughout the book, and you're just sickened even more by it. But yeah, at the time I was just like, let's just have fun, let's just do it. And then I think Tome is a very good follow up with the kind of the tone of the book, or the series. And yeah, no idea why I haven't been cancelled. Who knows? But yeah, I just like pushing limits. And and a thing I think that people forget sometimes is that the person behind those words is an actual human. And although we write these things, it's not how we are as a person. And I've had a lot of people that speak to me, and even family, when they've read a book, or friends, they read a book and they're just like, I can't believe that came out of your mind, because you don't come across like this person at all. Like you're quite reserved, and you don't jump on and like pile on arguments and things, or you don't have many opinions. So I'm just like, yeah, it's because I don't, and I just like writing, and the characters I'm just giving them life on the page. And a lot of that is through people that I've met. I've met a lot of horrible people, and I just kind of store that stuff up. And I'm just like, if I hear something and I think, oh, you are a despicable person, I'm like, but I could use that. I just store these things away, and then they just give life to characters that people absolutely hate. But that person is not the person who's written it. It's a character on the page. And I think a lot of readers sometimes forget that. And I think Eric LaRocca is a perfect example, because he gets absolutely slated all the time, and he's an absolutely lovely person. But they have to deal with all this kind of backlash of, oh, they're absolutely sick and twisted, and they must do that in their actual lives and all this. And it's like, no, they're writing a book. Like, just give them a break. But yeah, like, who knows? But I'm just going to keep writing the kind of crazy stuff that I do, and it seems to be working. People like it. But yeah, but that was also a season, as we say. So the season of Juniper. Now we're doing a season of grief, and then might be a season of kind of like horror sci-fi. Who knows? Who knows where this is going to go?
Yeah, well, I don't know where it's gonna go, but I'm sure it won't be a season of calm or a season of happy cozies. That's for
It's
sure.
even of romance books. Yeah, no, that's not
Yeah.
on the cards.
But I mean, you mentioned Eric LaRocca, and I'm so glad that, in spite him having a lot of detractors and getting a lot of hate and shit, I'm so glad that he's also got a massive fan base that are really into the vision that he's
Yeah,
creating, because I mean, goodness, he relentlessly delivers these books anyway, no holds barred,
yeah,
authentically Eric LaRocca. But if you weren't getting those fans as well as the detractors,
yeah,
it's gonna be tough for your psyche. I mean, I don't know if it's tough anyway. If it is, then he just plows through it.
yeah. I think it must be. one, he's an amazingly talented author, but you know, I think if he didn't have the fan base that he had, it must be such an isolating, awful place to be. Like, because I've read some of the comments that people leave on his books because they just pop up. Like, I don't go looking for them, but if I was facing that day in day out, I would just I don't know. It would be really difficult. But Eric, if you're listening, I'm always here.
Oh yeah, Eric knows that we are big fans of his work at This Is Horror, and I'm sure we'll be talking very soon for the new one that's
Mm.
coming out. So keep
Burnt
your
Sparrow, is
ears
that right?
peeled. That is correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. He's
He's also
announced a
doing a
hell of a
UK
lot of
tour.
books coming out.
I'm gonna
What
plug
was
it.
that? Sorry.
He's doing a UK tour as well.
Oh my God.
He's coming to Bath, I think, which is my nearest one. So I might try and get down
Have
to.
you met in person before?
No, so when I was coming up in the world, as they say, uh, me and Eric just started chatting and become very good friends. You know, I've called him numerous times on the the evening of the Stokers to like have a chat and wish him best. And we chat often. We haven't chatted for a little while, but I've not met them in person. But I'm really, it's in Bath, but I think it's during the week. But I'm going to try my hardest to get there because I'd love to see him and just give him a cuddle,
There you go.
a shoulder to
Yeah, I
cry
mean,
on if he needs it with with all those bad reviews. But I'm there for you, Eric. You know.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, before to kind of shift towards your decision to write, the rest of your books set in Britain. I mean, you haven't publicly said, you're always going to write in Britain. That's not a firm line, but there is this challenge that I sometimes find too, because what we're both doing is we're setting work in the UK and now me setting some in Japan as well. But we know that our core audience is in America.
Mm,
So and also, I mean, often the publisher, the agent, the film manager, so every professional is in America. So when you're writing these books set in the UK, are you deliberately writing it in British English? Are you
yeah.
deliberately using British English spelling? Are you using British English words? Do you ever make a deliberate and conscious choice to use a bit of an Americanism or to soften it because you know that a lot of your readers are in America? So what are the decisions that you're making in that regard?
So the decisions I'm making are normally informed to me by my editor. Um, but I would go into it and be like, right, I'm writing this in British English. Um, I don't want any kind of Americanisms. So if you spot those whilst you're editing, I was like, you need to change them. Um, and that was just a conscious kind of like, I was like, if I'm going to be writing about places in Britain and the stuff here, I was like, it needs to read like that. And I had thought, that might alienate some American readers, and I have thought about that, but I was like, we're just going to go with it, and we're going to see what happens. Um, and I've not had any like blowback from any of the publishers that I've gone to in America. So I'm with Clash, Trueborn Press, Cemetery Gates Media. Who else is there? Can't remember off the top of my head, but anyway. But I've had no blowback regarding those kind of stories that I've sent their way. They've fully got on board with the vision and the story. And I think if you've got if the story's there, you don't have to worry about kind of the alienation because people will just be pulled through. And I read, you read like tons of American horror, and I know Americans that read lots of like British horror. So it's just there's just not that much going the other way. But I think like I'd be lying if I didn't say I was kind of like nervous with the ones that were just set in Britain and kind of being like, is it going to do well? Are people going to get it? Um, and I proper go all out on the Britishness. Like I'm from London, so I chuck in loads of Cockney rhyming slang in there as well and everything, just to give it the authenticity that I want. And some of the books, obviously, when I was living in Bristol, I was writing about places in Bristol, and they're obviously they're all real places. And when I talk about driving from one place to another in a book, all the roads are exactly it's exactly the same. But yeah, so when I was writing about in Bristol, there's lots of the kind of the Bristolian dialect in there, and the characters speak with that twang. Not all of the characters are Bristolian, but like that is in there. And now I'm living in Wales. I'm going to start using this area as kind of the bedrock for some other kind of horrors, and we'll go from there and just see how it goes. But yeah, I really like it. I think the next book I'm writing is set back in America, so you'll have me back for a little bit, and we'll just see what the kind of sales are for that one I like. But like the sales are good. Like I'm not seeing a dip in kind of those horrors, and particularly like I Die Too, but they haven't buried me yet. Blew up, so that was great sales, and that's really British and set in Bristol, and so I think it's either my readership is growing and they're very what's the word keen to keep reading me, but I also know that book has like gone really wide in terms of distribution, which I've not had before, and it's sold really well, and Barnes and Nobles across America keep on buying it and putting it in their stock. So I'm reaching a demographic that I hadn't ever dreamed of, whether that's through Clash's kind of statement as being the publisher, or booksellers really pushing it because they've read it and they like it. Who knows? But that book is doing good numbers, and I'm excited for them to be re-releasing Devil's Pocketbook, which has been out of publication since a publisher that shall not be named went under and took royalties. But anyway, but yeah, I'm looking forward to them having that book because that book's special. Folklore, that is very British, set in Cornwall, in a place called Polperro. Lots of horror, lots of grief, lots of suffering, good suffering. But it's been obviously out of publication for over a year, and I'm just really excited for it to get back on the market, and with Clash as well, and the sales of I Die Too. I'm hoping that lots of other kind of Barnes and Nobles will start carrying it because of the success of the other book. We shall see. I've forgotten the question, but I think that's a good answer.
Well, I mean, the question was talking about, that decision when you have the American audience, but you're setting something in the UK. And I mean, certainly what you're doing is similar to what I've done when I've set something in the UK. It's like it's in the UK, so we're using British English, we're using British spellings, we're using British references. That's it. But I'm kind of at this interesting place now where I'm setting more and more things in Japan. So
Mm.
now there's all sorts of kind of dilemmas and quandaries. And I mean, for example, living here in Japan, I meet more Americans than I do Brits. And then when I'm speaking to Japanese people in English, they are more familiar with American English than they are British English. And so one of the things it's done, and probably hosting this as our podcast where we speak more with Americans as well, it's almost like I'm kind of fluid with whether I'm using British or American English, and everything has merged into one. And so
Wow.
rather than a word being, oh, this is what the Brits say, this is what the Americans say, they're just synonyms, they're just
Yeah.
alternative words. So, I mean, to actually represent a Brit living in Japan, you would probably have them mostly use British English, but occasionally American English. And it's like sometimes,
That's quite a cool hybrid though. Like to use that in a
yeah,
book would be incredible.
it is cool, but it's one of these things. And I speaking to another friend where it's like sometimes reality and authenticity can seem like an error to the people
Yeah.
who don't know. So it's like I'm going to be called out potentially for making errors when it's like, no, those are deliberate choices. This is actually the experience. But then the other dilemma I have, because particularly the next few books that I'm working on, whilst they have Western characters as the protagonists, there are a lot of secondary characters who are Japanese and they're speaking Japanese, but I'm translating into English because otherwise then the whole market's gone, you know. Um, and so then I often I'm thinking, well, this is a Brit translating Japanese. So actually, sometimes, like, it might be very British what they say because that is the British
Yeah, yeah.
equivalent. It's kind of capturing the flavor of the character. But also, I thought, well, sometimes you could decide, oh, well, this character, the translation is going to be more American.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
And so there's all sorts of dilemmas that have kind of jumped in now. So I suppose on that basis, if you were to set a story abroad and you were to use characters from a different nationality, but you're obviously writing it in English, are you going to go British English because that's
Yeah.
who you are, or are you going to go American English because that would be the more natural translation? Or has this conversation inspired you to be like, you know what, we're doing the hybrid?
Next book, all hybrid. It's quite funny because the book I've just finished writing, called Love Will Tear Us Apart. Um, it's it's a novel, but it's basically a found manuscript. So the person writing it is, or who has written the book, not me. This person has written the book. Um, Uses footnotes in it because it's a found manuscript. So the manuscript originally had lots of written kind of bits on it, but it's their first book they've ever written. So in the book, I was like, that's a really good idea. And then I started writing it and I started doing lots of errors in it. So, continually using the rule of three. So having three lots of like explanations. And then I thought to myself, oh, actually, yeah, if I use footnotes, I can also take the piss a little bit and just be like, oh, yeah, it's my first book. I've read about the rules of three, but I don't quite understand it. And then just have them pop up throughout because I didn't do it with footnotes to start with. And as I was reading it, I was just like, I wrote it and I reread it and I was like, oh, yeah, people are going to think I've gone mental because like I've put loads of errors in it on purpose. And I was like, I'm going to need to make sure that they don't think I've slipped backwards in my writing. But that was an interesting way of doing it. So, like, I guess footnotes could be used to unlock some of that kind of hybrid thing you were talking about. Like, but who knows? I think it's a good idea. I think you should run with it. I think you should write a trilogy of hybrid books.
Well, who knows? Maybe that will happen. I mean, probably a lot of my books could be very loose trilogies or part of loose series, but yeah. I think in terms of the rule of three or any writing rules that we learn, I mean, firstly, we need to learn the rules and then we make these conscious decisions whether we are or are not going to break them. And so, I mean, Chuck Palahniuk, for example, since we're talking about the rule of three, he's like, never use a list with three things, always go for two or for four. Now, I'm very aware of that advice, so quite often I do.
Mm.
But then sometimes I just deliberately decide, no, three feels right here.
Yeah, three
So it's
is
almost
always a
like
good one.
the more you know, the more it can almost become stifling or suffocating. I mean, you write in spite of it, but you can just think, oh, is someone going to think oh, you didn't know that rule? It's like, no, I did. I
Mm.
just decided not to follow
Well,
it.
because I'm a rogue, I'm a renegade.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm reading a book at the minute. So my editor Andy, he said read this book. I think it's called Dryer's English. So it was just kind of a book about the craft and like punctuation. And we spoke on the last podcast the fact that I struggle with it a lot. So he said I think you'd really enjoy it. So I was reading that, and that has a lot of rules in it as well. And it was like we learn these rules like the Oxford comma and all this kind of stuff, and it and obviously it tells you how to write properly. And I've read in there certain bits that were like, this used to be how you wrote thoughts, like in like speech marks, whatever, and then it was like italics. Now you just write it normally, or some writers don't differentiate between speaking and dialogue and like narration, the rest of it. And I was like, oh, okay. And there's things like, oh yeah, people tell you that you shouldn't start a sentence with and or but. And it's like, but sometimes just do it. I was like, yeah, just do it. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Honestly, like, I mean, I think the don't start with and but is something that you learn fairly early on. But recently, I've found I just kind of like doing that. And
Oh,
I think it elevates and makes the story better. So I think we can learn all sorts of rules, but particularly when you get a bit of experience with what you're doing, intuition and just personal aesthetic
mm,
is worth so much more. And also because we're writing fiction and we're often like we're both of us were writing fiction with a strong voice. Being true to that voice is far more important
mm,
than being grammatically correct or following a rule.
yeah,
Yeah, when I'm grammatically incorrect, that is a deliberate decision.
yeah, definitely. Rule breakers. That's the best way to be.
That's the title of this episode, Rule Breakers with Ross Jeffery.
Rule breakers and a shot of whiskey. Um, yeah.
So before I mentioned that Josh Malerman has deemed you the master of grief horror, and I would say from the last few books that you've released that this is not an inaccurate label.
Thank you
How
very
do
much.
you feel about being termed the grief horror writer?
Um, Quite blown away. Very British of me to say that. Yeah, like it's a genre I kind of fell into. I don't know why. Um, I think what pulls me into it is that grief, to whomever it happens to, is completely different and completely unique to that person. So there's many avenues you can go down, and you can still strike a chord with someone. Um, it happens to everybody at some point. You can suffer loss, which I think connects with readers, helps people process stuff, helps people prepare for what might happen, how they might feel. And I think I try to be as empathetic as possible when I'm writing about grief, because I know it is a challenging and a deeply kind of deep subject. And I kind of use it's weird being called the master of grief horror, because I have suffered grief, and it has affected me, but I haven't suffered as much as other people. Like I will speak openly about this bit. So when I was very little, my auntie disappeared. She just vanished one day, and I think I was like, I don't know, 2 or 3, and I'd never knew her really. Like I couldn't remember her. But I watched how my mother kind of suffered through that, and not knowing where her sister was, and also my uncle, like not knowing where his sister was as well, and he was quite young at the time, my uncle, and I remember growing up that my mum spent ages kind of talking to like the Samaritans and like other kind of like people, just trying to find her, and like, you know, I remember her doing lots of kind of like sending like photos and things like that of what she looked like, and, you know, if anyone sees her, all that kind of stuff. And when I was, I'm trying to think now, 15, 16, I was at my parents' house, and there was a knock at the door. It was Christmas Day, and there was a knock at the door. We were like, well, we're all here. Like, who's that? And my mum went to the door, and I could hear her crying. And I was like, what's it? And then I came around the corner, and there was this woman standing on the doorstep, and I didn't know who she was. I was just like, who the hell's this? And it was my auntie, and she'd come back to see us, and like we let her in, and she was like bawling her eyes out. She was a bag of bones, but she was bawling her eyes out, and like, and it was weird because I then just had this family member back in my life who I didn't know about, and then we spent like a year or so kind of reconnecting, and like she'd come with her partner who she left with at that point. Like back then, she'd left to go to Brighton or somewhere with him, and just completely disconnected from life, and didn't want to know our family at that point. And yeah, we got to know her, and I was like, oh, I've got this auntie back that I never knew I had, and it's brilliant, it's great. And within, I think it was within 2 years, she died of a heroin overdose. Knowing that, looking back, you could tell that she was an addict at the time when she came back to us, but I didn't know that then. And yeah, basically when she went away, she had this partner, and they just spent their life kind of being addicts. And I don't know what happened that made her come back, but she came back, and that was the first kind of taste of grief that I ever had, and it stung quite a lot, because I thought that I had this person back in my life that I really wanted to get to know, and like just grow up with, and because I've got quite a small family anyway, so having someone else come back into it was incredible. And then yeah, and she died, and went to the funeral and everything, and it was kind of a weird funeral, because there was lots of looking back at it, there was lots of addicts there, but I just thought they were just kind of like these her friends and whatnot, but it was quite obvious. And yeah, and that's really been the only grief I suffered until a few years back, when my granddad died. And that was like two pieces of grief, and they they affected me, and they've influenced the writing, because both of them were completely different, and both of them I grieved differently, and that interested me. And I was just like, oh, that's a peculiar kind of. You think grief would be the same all the time, but it's not. And I just find that really interesting, and that's kind of what I just started writing about. And I think the first book in the grief series is like Only the Stains Remain, and that was written. I work in kind of previously I've worked in kind of like social services and schools and things like that. So I've been on lots of kind of panels dealing with kind of child abuse and neglect and things like that. So I've heard firsthand of the horrors of it and kind of what happens. And I love writing about not boogeymen and kind of like Dracula or mummies and things like that. I like writing about human monsters. And that's what takes center stage in that book. And that was, again, like that book has done phenomenally well. Like I think it's my best seller. It's a novella, and I like Juniper. I hold nothing back in that one. I've had to listen and sit in on meetings about things that happen in that book, and I think people should know what goes on in the world. So I wrote about that, and it connected with so many people. But I had one review that came back that was, a survivor of abuse, and they said that once they'd read that book, it actually made them feel seen because they'd experienced some similar things that happened in the book, and the way I'd rendered the characters, it was kind of like they were reading about themselves and kind of how they dealt with their trauma and their grief and all that kind of stuff, which is incredible. And to touch someone so deeply like that with my words, like I could have just stopped with that one reader reading it and just been like, right, that book has done its thing. That's what I wanted it to do. And I've just got sucked into it. And I don't know what happened. Like all the books I wrote since then. So yeah, you've got Only the Stains Remain, Devil's Pocketbook, I Die Too, but They Haven't Buried Me Yet. An unreleased book, but a few vials more, deals with grief. Harvesting the Nightmare Fields has got grief in it. So there's like, I'm in a kind of like probably like a 6-book series of kind of genre of grief horror. And yeah, to be called the master of anything is quite humbling in itself. But like, yeah, the master of grief horror by bloody Josh Malerman, New York Times bestselling author, who's not blowing smoke up my arse, but actually means it. And like to hear you say that as well, like it's, I can't quite believe it. This little guy now sitting in Wales, but just writing, has been able to kind of claim that moniker of of being the master of grief horror. Is quite weird and wonderful and slightly peculiar. But it's cool. Not gonna lie.
And so you've given me a dilemma now because I want to talk about Only the Stains Remain, but I want to talk about, what happened with your auntie too. So I think let's go the auntie route to begin with. So to just set the stage, I mean, how old were you when she disappeared? And then how old were you when she returned?
So I was probably around about 3 when she disappeared, and then I was 15, 16 when she came back into my life. It was quite a developmentally, it's quite a big time. So I felt it, I think, a lot more than I would have if it was later or earlier.
And so, I mean, with your mother as well, what did she assume had happened? Were there any signs that she might have just decided to take off on
Yeah,
her
it's,
own?
from what I've heard, and you know what families are like. From what I've heard, it was just one morning she just wasn't there. Like she'd just gone, and I think she must have been like 18 or 20, so she was an adult. But she just up sticks and just completely disappeared. No forwarding address, nothing. Just I think my mum had gone to the house where they lived, and there was no one there. And then because my mum was the older sister, um, and then she was just distraught, and again, like, back with this kind of grief thing. Every year, and I don't think my mother has cottoned onto this, but myself and my wife have, that every year at the same time where we found out that she had died, my mother's mood drops. So, and it's every single year at the exact same time. But she's never kind of come to that conclusion on her own. It's just that we've been like, oh yeah, this is coming up, so let's keep an eye on her, because it's gonna. And it's that kind of stuff, all that kind of like passive stuff that's going on underneath someone's being, that is tied to grief. I just find us like really interesting to delve into. But yeah, so there was no idea why she did it, and I don't think when she came back into our lives that she ever kind of really expressed why she did it. And I think it was mainly the joy of having her back that made us not ask those questions. Or I didn't ask them because I was, I don't know, probably playing on a computer or something. But I don't think my mum really delved into much of it, the reasoning behind why she left. It was just something that was done.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with real life. There aren't necessarily kind of neat conclusions and neat explanations for things. And of course, in the movie, in the story version, you'd be asking, why
Yeah,
did you do it? And you'd be expected to have some sort of resolution or explanation, but real
mm,
life ain't like that. And God, I mean, what a terrible thing for all of your family to have
yeah.
gone through. And I wonder as well, do you think that influenced your decision to work in social care to help other people in these situations?
I don't know actually. I just see I could be paid a lot of money to do another job, but there's something about, because I've worked for charities, I've worked for lots of other things, but like the current job I do now as well is I work with homelessness and vulnerable people, um, and it's just something about being there for someone that I just love. And when you get a breakthrough and you help someone, it's more than what money could pay. And I'm just thrilled that I'm in the position that I am, that I can help people. And some of that, like, and like, I'm not um, outside of grief. Like, I still have pangs of it. So the other day, I had someone message me about their son. I was at work and I had an email, and it was a mother reaching out to say that her son has left home and she believes he might be in the area where I work, and sent me a picture of him and was like, if he turns up, could you please let me know? And like, I just need to know that he's safe. And it just brought back like those kind of like almost like a whiplash of kind of like, oh yeah, that's what my mother was doing when like her sister went, like, if I could help that person just know that their son or daughter is okay, then not giving away GDPR and all that bullshit, but just to be like, message and be like, I've seen them, they're okay, or I've seen them and they've been fed today. Like, that's kind of just what a privileged position to be in. But yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah, I just love doing the job. It's not for everyone, but and yeah, maybe that's been imprinted on me since that moment. I wouldn't be able to tell you, but maybe it is, and I like that.
I mean, you're talking about the benefits of the job, but I mean, it's got to take a toll as well. Are there things that you have to put in place for your own protection, for your own mental health and well-being? Because you're dealing with difficult situations every single day.
Mm. Yeah, it's challenging. There are avenues I can go that, like if there is a particular um, thing that happens or something like that, I've got avenues, so counselling at work and stuff I can access and things like that. But also, my wife's amazing, so I can come home after a bad day and just be like, "Well, this happened today," and then just kind of unburden on her, um, which is great because you know she then just reaffirms what I'm doing is good, and that you can't save everyone, but you can at least try. And um, yeah, it's good. Difficult, but good. I've seen like lots of very bad things. Like on my first week at work, because I'd left the job, I was made redundant from a job working in schools and building communities and things like that. And I took this job up at the homelessness day centre. And then my first week on the job, I had someone come in and hit someone with a cup and cut their face open. And then I had another fight in the, and I was like, I've come from somewhere that's not like this. And then I was like, there was a fight and I had to break that up. And then to round the week off, I had someone try and commit suicide in one of our toilets. I say tried; they did a bloody good job at trying. And like I opened, like they were calling out for help, and I opened the door, and like I have never seen so much blood in all my life. Like it was. Sorry, this is quite. There should be a spoiler about this. But there was like blood everywhere, and I was just like, shit, like, get me some towels. We need to save this person. Like, and yes, fortunately, we saved them. But like, I remember so I'm going to dive into this because it's just
Yeah, yeah.
crazy. But like, he'd cut his wrists from like wrists to elbow on both arms, and it was just everywhere. And then I went in, put towels around them, staunched the blood flow and everything. And then he was just looking at me like with these vacant eyes, and I was just like, right, I'm going to be here. I'm staying here. And then like he tilted his head to the side, and he'd also slit both sides of his throat, and it was like he had gills, and every time they would just open and blood would just be pouring, and I was just like, oh my goodness, like, um, but yeah, he was saved on that day, and we did a good job. But yeah, like it's difficult, but it's that also kind of like most of the stuff, most of the gore and the horribleness that I write and the graphic nature of it comes from things that I've seen, which I think they're horrible to witness and whatnot, but I think it helps the writing come across as authentic because they're things that I've seen and I'm not just making it up. But yeah, it's a challenging job, challenging kind of experience, and yeah, someone's got to do it, right?
Do you still have contact with this person who tried to commit suicide? Do you know if they're doing any better, if they got the support that they needed?
So we had contact with them. So they, because I didn't know them at the time because I was brand new into the role, but apparently they had used the centre for years, and one of the colleagues that I work with said that they probably did that here because they knew it was it sounds stupid, but because it's a safe place and they know it, that actually they needed help and they came to us at the time that they were at their lowest. And yeah, so once they left us, went to hospital, found out that they had they'd been sectioned, and then we kept up contact with them, sent one of our workers to go and see them in hospital, and then they were moved to a kind of what's it called, assisted kind of care facility afterwards, and then I think about 6 years ago, they moved into their own kind of accommodation, and they're doing well. They haven't been back, so for us, they've kind of like sustained their accommodation, and they're doing well. And then we just wait, hopefully, for one day where they just pop in and just say, "I'm doing all right," which quite a lot of them do once they're housed and homed and fending for themselves. They come back and just thank us for kind of being there when they needed us. Um, but yeah, and those days are very special, and they make the job worth it. Like when you see people coming back after being so low and broken and at the end of their rope, and we've done something that's helped them move on, or get help, or be able to process things that happened in their lives. That's that's something money can't buy, and that's why I do the job.
Oh my goodness. I mean, you're living a remarkable life. You have real purpose, and your writing is amazing. But this is the real shit. This is what it's kind of all about. But you're simultaneously saving people with your day job and through your writing as well. I mean, when you speak about the effect that this had for a survivor with Only the Stains Remain. And I mean, if you look at that book that kicked off the grief horror for you, I mean, goodness, maybe every time you enter a new season, that first book is the most raw, unflinching look, because
Yeah.
this one, I mean, this has to be the nearest to Jack Ketchum's The Girl Next Door.
Hmm.
And I think in a sense, it's almost I spit on your grave for survivors of childhood abuse.
Hmm.
It's an uncomfortable book. It's an unflinching book, and it never really lets up. And I mean, I think for that reason, people need to know if what this is about, going in, because if you're affected by that kind of childhood abuse, if that is something that is gonna just set you off on your own downward spiral, this might not be the book to read, because it is unflinching, as I said, and it really asks that question which you literally put in the book, how far you're gonna go, because you say to kill a monster, you have to become a monster.
Hmm.
So you've got that question almost of, when should one become a monster? Should one ever become a monster?
Yeah.
Who gets to deal out justice? It's so heavy, not just in the delivery, not just in the content, but thematically, and in terms of the questions about humanity and right and wrong that you'll invariably ask yourself.
Yeah, that book is, like you said, like the first book of the new season is unflinching. That one is like, when I wrote it, I was chatting. I was at the time I was doing podcasts with Kev Harrison, um, and Nat TC Parker, and like I sent it to them when I'd written it, and um, I was just like, I've written this book. It's quite dark, but I just need to send it to people that I know and I can trust. And I was just like, could you just read? And they both read it and came back to me and were just like, bloody hell, that's dark, but it's good. And I was like, okay, that's kind of what I needed to know. And then I was just like, right, I'm not one about standing back and letting moments pass. I was just like, right, let's just go with it. This is how it's going to be. And yeah, for anyone listening, it deals with issues of, well, a child abuse that happens, and the child at the time is now a adult and coming to terms with what happened, and how to seek revenge. I think quite a lot of the reviews talk about how, although it's dark and twisty and graphic and horrible, um, none of the actual abuse happens on the page. Um, I take you there, but I don't like. We don't need to know that. You don't. We don't. That's not something I need to read or write about or get my head into. Is the actual physical act of it. Um, so I take the reader there, but I don't show it, which I think for the book has been a real positive, because lots of people are like, oh, I'm not going to read that, and then someone will jump in and be like, no, you have to read it. It's really good. I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but they're like, it's really good, but none of that stuff happens on the page, so don't worry. There's no kind of graphic details of the actual acts. And that's what I wanted to do when I was writing it. I was like, I don't want to glorify that, because like splatterpunk and all that sometimes delves into that aspect. And I was like, it may be nominated for a splatterpunk award, but I'm not. That's not what I want to be, and that's not what I want to write about. And I'm not glorifying the action in any way. I'm kind of glorifying the revenge, and that is on the page for everybody to read. But yeah, it's like you said, no holds barred. It is what it is. And yet, readers and reviewers have all said it's kind of like a spit on my grave, kind of spit on your grave. I can't remember what it's called. Spit on your
I
grave?
spit on your grave.
Yeah.
If you had I spit on my grave, then that's like the horror comedy version.
Yeah, that too. Oh. But yeah, like it's received really good praise. Lots of people, and I'm going to let you into a little secret here. Lots of people have said um, that book is Ketchum-esque. I think Eric LaRocca said it as well. I had not read any Jack Ketchum before I wrote that book, and because lots of people mentioned it, I was like, oh, I'm gonna read some of his. And obviously I didn't know, because I came to him quite late. I didn't know much about him, so I was just like, I reached out to Josh and just said, "What's the best book he's written?" And then he came back and was like, "Well, the book you got to read is The Girl Next Door." And I was just like, "Okay." And I read that, and I was like, "Wow." I think that's one of the only books I've ever wanted to reach inside the book and actually help the person in it. Like physically, I just had to, and then I was just like, "Wow, that's good." But yeah, so I don't want people thinking, "Oh, I've just copied Jack Ketchum," because I honestly never read him before, and I've read a few since. Like I read, is it Red? I like that one. That was quite good.
It is, yeah, yeah. But I think it's Ketchum-esque, and you have the same feelings in that it is an uncomfortable read, but so in terms of the reaction, in terms of the delivery, there's similarities, but in terms of the content, I mean, no one could correctly say that you had copied
Uh,
Ketchum and The Girl Next Door. I mean, it's clearly very distinct, and that's more about, a group of children next door discovering her, and yeah, and that's also based off a real life case as well.
yeah,
You
yeah,
have specific the Sylvia Likens case, whereas what you're doing here, it's grounded in reality, it's grounded in real cases, but there's not one specific case. And anyway, if people had an issue with that, it's like, well, read Let's Go Play at the Adams by Mendel Johnson, which was written before The Girl Next Door, which is based off the Sylvia Likens
yeah, yeah.
case. And you know what? Both books are good at what they do. You're allowed to have similar books, but I don't
And
know if I mentioned this before, but because you were talking about actually you take people right up to the moment. And so for me, that really reminded me of Not Forever, But For Now by Chuck Palahniuk, because that's exactly what he does. a lot of people said with that book, wow, it was very sexually explicit. And he's like, actually, that was your mind.
Yeah, it wasn't.
I just used euphemisms like having it off.
Yeah,
He didn't describe any of that detail. So it's like Chuck did with Not Forever, But For Now. It's pretty similar in terms of what Texas Chainsaw Massacre did, which you mentioned earlier with the original film.
yeah.
You feel that you've watched this horrendous, gory, graphic thing. No, you've got choice shots and you've got different cutaways, and so
Mm.
you're almost tricked into thinking you witnessed more than you did because it's your mind, it's your fucked up little mind that's filled in
Yeah,
the details and done that. So
you're watching
don't
what you
blame
want
Ross
to
Jeffrey, blame yourself, you rungan.
watch. And talking about like going, this loops back to the kind of like your hybrid kind of the bit we were just talking about, because with that book, Only the Stains Remain, it's set in England, and I was trying to be clever here because I think there's only one mention of where it's set, and I believe it's the Forest of Dean. I think I'm really stretching my brain here to think, but I think it's the Forest of Dean. But then, and I was just like, this was this kind of segue between the America coming to the UK kind of writing, and quite a lot of the names that I used are almost kind of American. So you've got like Jude and Kyle and like Abraham. I think Abraham, I can't remember, but like a few of the others. And I kind of tried to just be like, okay, I'm going to write here, but I'm going to hopefully link in with some American names just to kind of keep that audience thinking it's like that, because I don't really go into much detail other than that. But then I also kept the language quite like American English, and like the spellings kind of like similar as well, because I was just like, I don't know, I think I was maybe a little nervous about just bringing it completely as a kind of like shock to the system for any readers that had read my other work and were carrying on. But yeah, that's, and then after that I was just like, sod it, let's just go with just go with it being in England. um, but yeah, so that was kind of probably the only kind of hybrids that I've done, but I did it sneakily.
Well, I think in terms of the hybrid, and it might upset some British people, but I do think that the English language is becoming more fluid and more of a hybrid, even amongst British people and within Britain. I think it's because of probably the influence of American television and American films within the mainstream culture. And
Yeah,
so you're seeing, a lot of younger people, they're naming their children essentially American names or perhaps after American characters. And I mean, even in my novel, House of Bad Memories, you have the Chav sister, to put it in probably not politically correct terms, and one of her children is called Kanye. Well, you can guess where where that came from, but
what do
that's
you mean by that?
exactly her children are called Kanye and Caden, but that's exactly, it fits
Yeah,
what somebody like the sister Jade would have called her children.
yeah, yeah,
And so I think even you can set a book in the UK and you can have particularly a younger character use some Americanisms because it's what happens.
yeah.
If you've got a bunch of mates around, maybe they'll take the piss out of them. Oh, Ross thinks he's a bloody Yank. All right. So,
Yes, this is true.
and
But it's like,
that's what
yeah,
I try to do. If I have a detail that I think somebody will criticize, I've been doing this particularly with the latest one that I'm writing on. I'll actually call it out in the text, or I'll have a character criticize it, and it's like, you see,
yeah,
I
yeah.
did it deliberately.
It's not a mistake.
Well, I've already said on record in this podcast, every grammatical mistake is a deliberate choice. Says on record. What an arrogant thing to say. It's a good catch-all. It means
It
if I
is,
have made a mistake, you don't know.
yeah. And you can just refer people to this episode, and then it's just
Exactly.
a constant loop.
Yeah, which will hopefully help with your book sales, so everybody's happy.
Everyone is happy.
But I mean, if we shift forward to I died too, but they haven't buried me yet.
Hmm.
This was one where it took some of the kind of thematic concerns and the grief horror feeling, but I feel it put it in a more conventional story form, shall we say.
Hmm.
But the controversy in inverted commas with this one is, of course, the homophobia and transphobia that's throughout the book. You know, when you've got one of your central characters,
Yeah.
you know, you talk about the Eric LaRocca school of trying to get cancelled. This is it right here. So, I mean, let's talk about the genesis of this book. Let's talk about just your approach in knowing that you were going to hit upon topics that are extremely uncomfortable and they need to be handled with some care.
Hmm. Okay. So this is the book that I thought I was going to be cancelled over. um, Obviously, homophobia is a massive topic. Um, One that I see in my daily work. We have guests that come in that are either transitioning, gay, lesbian, whatever they are, um, and I see on a daily basis how they are victimized, abused, and basically treated like shit by other people that access our center because they're different, and these bigoted idiots that we have don't accept them. So quite a lot of the dialogue that is in the book is things that I have heard firsthand through my work where I work. And just a caveat on that is that I don't allow that to happen in my place of work. I rectify it and I ban people and I put people straight and tell people to be, accepting of all people. We have to be accepting of you, you bigot. Um, and So the genesis of this story is that I just had the title of the book in my head, and it was just that line, and it had just come to me one night, and I was just like, "That is a brilliant line." And obviously because I've been writing grief, I was just like, that could fit so well with something. I just need something to work on. And then doing my thing with my journal and my notebook, I started making notes and came up with a story, and then someone called Josh Malerman. I was having a chat with him, and I said, "I'm about to write a book." It was a bit of a drunken chat. We'd had a few whiskies, and
Is this the Josh Malerman or just someone called Josh
this
Malerman? You
is
haven't
Josh Malerman.
specified. Okay, so
Josh Malerman,
the Josh
the
Malerman.
Josh Malerman, and we'd had a few drinks, and we were just chatting, and we'd been on the phone for a couple of hours, and then I just said to him, I said, "I've got an idea for a book," and basically I told him the book from the start to the finish. And because I had it all written down in my journal, I was just like, "This is the book." And he was like, "Fucking hell." He was like, "You got to write that." And then I didn't know because we were both drunk. So I was like, "Okay." And then a couple of weeks later, he messaged me and said, "I've got an idea for a book." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." But he didn't And then I just got the ... on the text, and it was just like, oh, he's still writing. Like, what's he writing? And then it came up, and he said, when are you thinking of writing it? And I was like, well, I'm going to start writing in a couple of weeks. And he said, oh, okay, I'm going to do it as well. And then this spawned the writing a novel alongside Josh together, where we would send each other every 10,000 words that we wrote, we would send it. And this was whilst he was writing Instance Around the House. So, which is absolutely incredible. I had the pleasure of reading it as he wrote it. So it was kind of like serialized, and it was phenomenal. And like, it was just, and then like he was reading mine, I was reading his, every 10,000 words all the way through. And then I was like, because obviously I kind of knew his story. He was telling me bits, but like most of it I didn't know. And then as we're drawing to a close, I'm like, oh, I'm almost finished. I was like, I'll send you the 10K before the final 10. And he went, I've got no idea where this is going. And I was like, I told you. Like, we had a conversation. I told you the whole story. And he was like, I just don't remember it. And I was just like, well, if I've told you the story and you don't remember it, and I've got you this far, then like I know I'm doing something right. And then yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing experience. All finished, all done. He loved it, and then we were just discussing then after the book. I was really concerned at the time with releasing it because of the subject matter. Obviously, being a white, straight, male, privileged, working class background, but I am privileged in the state of things. And I was just like, I've written it, and I believe it's a great book. And then we had many conversations about it, and he was like, look, yes, it deals with difficult subject matter, but that's the characters. He was like, look, anybody that knows who you are would know that these are not your thoughts. These are the thoughts of the characters. It was like, sometimes you've just got to like believe in the book. He's like, if you want to try and get some sensitivity readers to read it and see what they think. And I was like, right, okay. So I reached out to some sensitivity readers. They read it. I had a mixed bag. I had some people that said they didn't like it. I had some of the sensitivity readers that read it and thought it was absolutely brilliant, which didn't really help because I was hoping that they would all be on the same page. And then I was just like, right, okay. With books, you're never going to write a book everybody's going to love. And I was just like, I believed in the book. I had people that I'd sent it to as sensitivity readers that believed in it. I was just like, right, okay. And I'd also had sensitivity readers for Tone, which deals heavily with racism. Yeah, like I know what the score is because I do skate the very thin line. And like Gabino Iglesias had read Tone and was like as a sensitivity reader, and he also blurbed it, so that shows what he believed in it. But then I was like, right, okay, let's go. I'm not afraid of releasing books. I believe books should be challenging and they shouldn't be censored in a way that you shouldn't write about that because you're not of that whatever definition you want to give, whether you can't write about racism because you're white and you're writing about black people, or I really struggle with that because I've had people say to me that I shouldn't write women characters because I'm not a woman, but quite a lot of my protagonists are all women, and I have lots of people say that I write women really well. It's just how it is. But this is the book that I was very nervous about, and I was just like, right, let's just go for it. And I sent it to Clash, and And well, I contacted Clash because I'd never worked with them before, didn't kind of like really know anybody there, and I sent it to them, and then Christoph, who runs it with Lisa, kind of came back and said, "I'd really be interested in to read that if I sent her like an email first, and he said, oh, because I've read quite a lot of your work and I really like you and I've always wanted to work with you." And I was just like, oh crap, like this. Then that made me feel good because I was like just sitting here in my house being like, I don't think people know who I, because I don't go to convention. I can't afford to go to conventions. I don't really enter into much kind of like chatter online and stuff. I mean, I'm cordial and stuff, but I don't think that people in the know who I am, and I'm quite a humble person, so I just don't bother kind of like talking that much. But the fact that like, because I knew who Clash were, and I was just like, oh yeah, I think this book would fit with them. I spoke to Josh, and Josh was like, yeah, that's kind of that'd be right up their street. And then he came back and he was just like, yeah, I'd love to kind of read it because I'd really like to work with you. And then I was like, oh, okay, like cool, I'll send it. And then literally, it's probably one of the fastest acceptances I've had of a book. And he came back and was like, yeah, I love it. I'm going to go with it. And I was like, are you okay with all this kind of stuff? Because it might have a bit of blowback. And he was just like, yeah. He said, the novel's brilliant. He said, I want it. Like, we're going to publish it. And then that kind of gave me the kind of a bit of relief around it because I was really nervous. And also watching, like we just discussed, Eric just be absolutely assassinated by everyone. And like, yeah, I was just like, and he's of that community and he's writing a book. And then he also just got absolutely slayed by that community for writing about characters that, are dark and twisty. So I was just like, okay, that's given me like a bit of confidence. And then it went forwards and sold a lot of copies. Was the amount of books that it has reached through the reach of Clash and like gone into bookstores and Barnes and Nobles, and the numbers that Clash have shared with me of how well it's done. I'm blown away by it because I thought it might end my career. um, but yeah, and I love the book. I love it, and I've got a film and TV agent that's shopping it. He loves it, thinks it's brilliant, and I'm just grateful to have. I think it's the point. I'm saying career like it. I don't like using that with my writing because it makes me sound really lofty when I'm not. But like I think I was at a point of my writing career where I could take that chance, and I felt confident enough in my ability to do it and be like, sod the rules. Let's just go with it and see where it leads. And it's doing well. Like some people hate it, some people absolutely love it, and I get 5-star reviews, I get 1-star reviews, I get 4-star. Like it's just all over the place, and I'm just grateful that it's out there and people are connecting with it, even if you don't like it. Like I think the subject matter is something you should read, and a lot of people have commented that they don't like the homophobia, the bigoted view of the protagonist in it. And he's not a likable character. He doesn't have much to himself other than his bigotedness. But that is the character that I wrote. And there are people in this world that are exactly like that character. And to shield yourself from it, to be like, oh, that's unbelievable because nobody's like that, then I'm sorry, you are completely mistaken. It's just, I write raw words on the page, and that is, in my opinion, some of the people that I've met.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny for people to come up to you and say, "Oh, I don't like that character." It's like, well, good. You're
Yeah,
not you're not meant to. I didn't think while reading it, oh fuck me, Ross really wants us to like this guy. What a lad. You
yeah,
know, I would imagine the more controversial point will be much like all of your books. You add a little bit of spice at the end, let's say. I'm thinking, how can I say this as broadly as possible?
yes.
And I would say it was a decision as to how you delivered that spice.
Mm.
That would be the controversial point. That would be the point that I think would
Yeah.
divide people more.
Mm. I think that has gone down remarkably well from the people that I have spoken to, um, but also it has not gone down well. But good writing divides opinion, and well, that's what I believe anyway. So um, so I'm doing a good job. Um, like if people hate that character, good, because that's how I wrote him to be hated. Um, and yeah, it's just yeah, like it's a great book, and it's one of the books that I've written that I actually spoke to my children about, like when I was writing it, because they come in sometimes and see me writing, so they were just asking about it, and I just gave them the cliff notes to it. I didn't tell them everything about it, and that's the one book I've written that they both say they want to read, and I'm just like, nah, not yet. I'm like, maybe many years down the line you can have a read of it, but not yet. But yeah, it's an interesting book, and with that book as well, like I've started to, if you're a reader of my fiction, you'll start to see tiny Easter eggs in each of my books. So, for instance, I wrote when I started basing them all in the UK. I wrote Devil's Pocketbook, so not excluding only the Stage Domain, but when I proper cemented, yes, they're going to be in Britain. Um, in the Devil's Pocketbook, there's a character in it called Eric. In I Die Too, but they haven't buried me yet. The grief support group talk about Eric going to Paul Perot, which is the link to Devil's Pocketbook, and then in Harvesting the Nightmare Fields, there's a character that pops up to see Abe, who's this farmer, who is one of the characters from the grief support group, and then there's just these little kind of little tokens that I add into each book that link it somewhat to something else, which I really like. I don't know if everybody else likes it, but I like building the Jeffrey verse, as I like to call it, um, into these little books now. It's quite entertaining.
It's so funny to hear you say that because so the last time we spoke, I had read Only the Stains Remain, but I hadn't read the Devil's Pocketbook. But since I've started reading the Devil's Pocketbook, and when Paul Perot came up, I thought, I swear you've mentioned Paul Perot in a different book before, but it's like, did you just mention it in an interview?
Uh,
But it was so specific because during my childhood, I went to Polperro a lot. We often had family holidays in the kind of Lou Polperro
yeah,
area of Cornwall. So yeah, I know. I think you're referencing Polperro in multiple books here, but yeah, only now through this conversation has that been
finally,
confirmed. So
yeah.
Polperro is part of the Ross Jeffery universe.
Yes, I don't own the place, but yeah, it's in my books.
Not yet. No,
Not
we
yet.
need your film agent to get you a
Yeah.
few of those lucrative deals, and then perhaps
And I'll
you
swim
can
and buy
become
it
the
as a
the
writing
mayor of
degree.
Polperro. But we are coming up to the time that we have together today. Once again, we could have spoken for even longer. That's just the way that it goes. But before we end, I want to know what you're working on next. but it's a question where I know the answer because we're doing something not exactly together, but we got something going on. So, what's next for you?
So we got something cooking, and this came about from our last conversation, um, and also from kind of what I've shared about the kind of writing exercise that I did with Josh. So I'm in September. I'm going to be starting a new book, which I've already started sketching in my pad. Got my wife to write the title card, so that's all set in stone. That is going to be the next book. And it's called The Reluctant Executioner. And that's kind of, again, so I've written a couple of books now that are a bit sci-fi, so this might be my sci-fi era, but none of them have come out yet. They are being shopped currently, but I'm entering a bit of a sci-fi horror world, and this one's set around the kind of urban legend myth of the kind of Philadelphia experiment, where a boat vanished, reappeared, and follows the kind of story of a sailor that was on that was then kind of used to carry out some type of assassinations throughout the modern world history. Um, it's a very epic sounding book. I'm very excited about it, and if I can pull it off, it'll be brilliant. But I believe I'm bringing somebody else along for the ride who is also going to start a book in September with me, and we're going to
Well,
share our progress. I don't know who that is. Do you know?
well, I have a feeling that that person might be called Michael David Wilson, which is
Yes.
me. For anyone who's listening for the first time and can't remember who the fuck is this guy. And so at the moment, I've been kind of maniacally working away on another novel because I set the aim to finish that by September. And then I thought, well, I'll start another one then. This is how it goes. There's no kind of stopping. It's like you finish one, you move on to the next. And so then when we both saw, okay, we're starting in September, we thought, why don't we do something with this? Why don't we document it? And specifically, I was quite inspired, but also just creatively intrigued about this way that when you're planning, you write 1 to 2 sentences for each chapter.
Mm,
That's your plan. Whereas I write reams of pages. And I thought, well, why don't I try this method? So, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. So we're going to be starting that in September. We're going to be exchanging words. We're going to be documenting it in some way. We're still kind of going back and forth on that. So you've got something from your sci-fi era. I've got something from my set in Japan era, and we're going to see what on
yeah,
earth happens. But yeah, incredibly exciting.
yeah. I'm really looking forward to it because I just love trying something different all the time. Although I'm going to be doing the same thing, but like it's with somebody else, so it's different, and it's going to be a yeah. I can't wait to see what you, because also like doing this with a different writer is also just seeing like your process and how it works, and kind of like, because I just love learning stuff from different writers that I admire, and like, so just working with you and like being able to be like seeing your polished early draft, but being like, oh, okay, that's how he writes and that's what he does, and like it just really intrigues me. And also, I get to buy a new vinyl record if I don't have one, which is also another wondrous thing. I need to work out what soundtrack it's going to be, but um, yeah, I'm very excited, and I've already shared with you, obviously, a couple of pictures from my journal of what is in, well, what we're going to be looking at. But I think this week now, because I've got that book out of the way, um, I'm going to start doing my scaffolding 2 sentence structure and trying to see so I can get ready. So when you've finished your book, we can just go right. Let's go. And just yeah, I just want it to be fun and exciting, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be.
Absolutely. Well, talking about fun and exciting, this has been fun and exciting, but we are all out of time. So before you go, of course, where can listeners and viewers connect with you?
Um, quite easily, if you type my name into Google, I appear everywhere. Ross Jeffery, author. I am on Blue Sky and Instagram are the only two social medias that I am on, and that's again Ross Jeffery, author. I also have a MailChimp thingy mailing list. I'm so rubbish at it. I can't even remember what it's called, but I've got one of those. It's called Horror Slices. It's linked on my website, so you can sign up to that. And I will desperately try to use it more. And maybe when we start doing this project, I can have content to actually put on there, because currently all my content is tied up in being shipped out to places, so I don't really have any to share. So I haven't written anything, but you can find me there. All the previous newsletters are available, and yeah, that's it really. Find me online.
All right. Well, thank you once again for chatting with me.
No, thank you very much for having me.